welcome everyone to today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want. Today we're going to dive more into the topic of intuition. We have covered this probably extensively on this podcast at this point, but there was something that you said, Ashley, recently that made me be like, we got to talk about intuition again because it's so important and so many of us either go with it or go against it. And I figured why not talk a little bit about that. So in case we haven't met, my name is Karen.
My name is Ashley. And yeah, I love intuition and I love like really tapping into that gut feeling and all that kind of stuff. And I love talking about it. Um, and I have found over the last couple of weeks, and like we just talked about it on our last podcast about Pluto moving into Aquarius, I have found since that time frame, we just had that big full moon too, the last full moon of 2024, which is all about abundance. My intuition has been like louder than ever. And so I don't know, coincidence maybe, or maybe it's being influenced by those things. I'm not sure, but it's pretty cool.
Okay, so yeah, so you're definitely going to have to explain what you mean by louder than ever for other people because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that would love to know, like maybe they're like, I'd love to tap more into my intuition. I'd love to know how to tap deeper into it, or maybe I've never tapped into it before. So, what's been your experience and what's going on with you?
Yeah, I find that the biggest thing for me with intuition is trusting myself.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
so, like, when you have that feeling, like, oh, I'm having this thought, like, or this, like, all knowing, it's like, listen to that. And the more you listen to it, the more frequent it's going to happen. And when I was like a Christian and religious, this one youth pastor said, like, oh, like, ask God to give you a parking spot. And so like I'd always be like, okay, I want a parking spot right there so I don't have to walk. Thank you. And it would happen basically every time. Like I'm sure it happened like every time because I remember like being like, this is like fucking dope. It always works. And then I also would go like traveling a lot and especially traveling like in bigger cities that aren't like where I live or normally go. And instead of like following a map or asking for directions, I would just be like, okay, God, tell me where to go. And I would just follow cues, and somehow it always worked. I always found my way. And so I would flex that muscle, like I would strengthen it. And so the more you do strengthen anything, it's going to grow. And so that worked really well for me. And obviously now it's a different mentality of what that actually was than it being God. But same idea, right? And it's just learning to listen when it talks. And yeah, sometimes it's a very quiet voice and sometimes it's very loud. So for example, Derek was buying a part for his business. And I was like, no, I don't think you should. And he's like, no, I really think I should. I'm like, nope, don't do it. Don't buy it. And I just had this gut feeling not to do it. And he's like, okay, fine, I won't. And then he had to go, like it was two towns over, and he had to go there anyways. And this person still had it for sale, and then it was cheaper. And he's like, I really think I should get it. I'm going to be there already, so I'm not going to be making the extra drive. I really think I should get it. And I still had that gut feeling not to, but I'm not a plumber. I don't know what tools are needed. I don't know what prices there are and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. Do whatever you want. I don't think you should, but go for it. And it was just like this very little like thing. So I just let it go. It never popped up again, never thought about it again. It was all good. And then the first time he goes to use it, it doesn't work.
Mm,
And so I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm like, even my quiet little voices, we need to be listening to them better. Um, and then this last Thursday, like kind of like an example of it getting stronger, we have been self-representing ourselves in court for a while, and I've been using like free legal services for advice. And we used to have a lawyer who was one of the best in the Okanagan area that we live. And I just had this like feeling to call him. And I was just like, no, like we don't have court until April. Like we have little things here and there between now and then. Court has consumed a large part of the last 4 years of my life, and I don't want to deal with any of it right now. And so I'm not calling him. literally have decided that I'm putting myself first for a long time and doing the things that I want to do and getting like back into making good money and all the things. And I'm not dealing with court right now. And this voice was like, call him right now, like call him right now, and just over and over again. And it was like I was thinking it in my head, like, when you have your own thoughts, it was like so loud, so audible, not this like slight like inkling feeling, like, like where like I don't know where this is coming from. It was like audible in my ears. Call him right now. And like it was his name specifically too. I was just like, fuck it, whatever. I'll call him. I don't want to. And I think this is stupid because I don't even know what I'm asking him. And um all that kind of stuff. So I called him, and then Derek called me within like 4 rings. So I hung up and talked to Derek, and then I'm like, okay, well, I called him. Like, it is what it is, like no big deal. um and then I got off the phone with Derek like 3 seconds later, and the voice was even louder, and like literally, like when I say loud, like it's like someone standing right beside me on either side of my head screaming, call this person right now, because it was his name. And I was just like, okay, fine. And the next time I called him, he answered on the second ring. Not his paralegal, not his assistant, him, knew who I was, haven't spoke to him for over a year, and talked to me for a while and answered my questions and helped me out. And I just knew what I needed to talk about somehow, once he answered, because he asked questions. And so I just kind of answered the questions. And it was a very productive phone call. And it turns out that my situation was time sensitive, and I didn't know that because
Mm.
the legal advice that I had didn't tell me. So, like, those are two very, very different examples. And yeah, so that is to me intuition. Like, that is how it can have a place in our life and how it can guide us in the right direction. But so sometimes I'll get hard on myself where it's like, oh, I should have spoke up louder. Like I should have
Mm.
told, no, you're not buying it, and been more like, I'm making the rules.
Yeah,
You should
yeah.
listen to me. And I just was like, oh, I should have been more forceful and told him no. Like my gut saying no, you gotta listen, but he has his own
Yeah, he's his
intuition
own
and all that
person.
kind of
Yeah.
stuff too.
Mhm.
And so then when it broke, I'm like, oh, we should have listened to my intuition. But the product does work. It just, for like the job he needed, it was more extensive. So he needed more of a commercial grade tool, not a residential tool. And this was residential. So he's like, yeah, this doesn't work for me having like our employees use it for jobs. And so he's like, I need something higher quality. So he turned around and sold it for the same price he bought it for. So at the end of the day, like it's not like, ah, fuck, you didn't
Yeah.
listen to your intuition. It was a one-time thing, one chance, you're fucked, it's over.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think too, like, we think that if we miss that little intuitive voice that we've missed it and oh my God, I just fucked up my whole world. That's
Yeah.
something that's something I think is really important to talk about because that can really mess up a lot of people, myself included, probably you as well, Ashley, where we're like, "Oh, I missed that voice and now I've just completely messed everything up." No. No, you haven't. It's fine. Your intuition telling you and nudging you to do certain things. I feel like there's other ways to for the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, source, ourselves to kind of wake us up and get ourselves on the right track, basically. I think there's multiple ways that that happens. And what you just described with your gut intuition and you felt like somebody was like telling you on your shoulder, that's just one way, right?
Mhm.
And it wasn't life changing that Derek bought this thing and then sold it back for the same amount of money that he bought it for, right? Like
Like,
that's not,
yeah. Sorry.
no,
With that story too, like it was really frustrating for him, the whole situation, because they were an older couple and they didn't trust him to e-transfer. So he had to go to the bank and get
mm,
cash. And what would have been like a 5-minute quick interaction turned out to be like an hour of his time.
mm,
And so like it was inconvenient for sure, But
yeah.
like again, life changing? Fuck no.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of us get tripped up on, I didn't listen to my gut. I mean, I have an example for myself of a time where I didn't listen to my gut. So, um, I was telling you, Ashley, this was probably like a month or two ago. I was like, I feel like I haven't really reached out to my business partners, and I feel like I need to, like my ex business partners, and I feel like I need to. And you were like, well, you can, but it's not going to hurt you, and it's not going to be right, wrong, good, or bad if you don't. And I was like, yeah, I kind of agree. And I was like, I think I'm still just going to pause for a minute. Well, I kept
Mhm.
hearing it. I kept being like, nah, I feel like you need to, you need to. Well, we had the Hurricane Helene come through, and it went through Georgia too, right? And so
Mhm.
my husband, being my husband, he cares about anyone and everything. He decided to reach out to my old business partners and be like, "Hey, are you okay? Like, I saw you just had this hurricane. Are things good for you?" And I kind of was disappointed in myself that I was not the first one to have made that connection, that contact, because it felt like now, okay, now he's said something first. Now I feel like I need to, right? And
Mhm.
I didn't want it to come from that energy, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that it's right, wrong, good, or bad. It's just that that's not the way that I wanted it to go, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So, but that didn't make or break me, right? Like
Mhm.
it's
Oh,
not gonna make or break me. Like these, I don't ever feel like there's just one way for the energies around us to get our attention, right? Whether you call them spirit guides, whether you call them just beings, it doesn't matter what you fucking call them. It's all the same energy. It's that love energy. It's that source energy. And I do think that that love source energy on occasion wants to get our attention because there's certain things that it wants us to like, hey, this would be really good for you to do, but it doesn't mean that we're going to be completely derailed in our life if we don't do it, right? Like it just means that we decided to do a different path. And there's so many stories of people out there that are like, my intuition told me to do XYZ. I decided not to. I went against it and I did this other thing, and I'm still like, I'm back on that path that I originally, my gut intuition told me to get on, right? Doesn't mean that our life is now ended. It just means that we weren't paying attention. Now we are. And we just needed this little side rail because we forgot that we have to listen to ourselves every once in a while.
yeah, exactly. And that's like the big thing. I think if like something really has to happen, it probably will,
Yeah.
like we've mentioned before, like people that got into car accidents on their way to work and then 9/11 happened,
Yep.
like was that just a happen chance, like it just happened by chance,
Mm-hmm.
or was that like the universe like intervening, I don't
Right.
know. I can swing both ways. If the universe is not going to intervene like that, and like it happened, I can go both ways. And so like at the end of the day, like big stuff is going to happen and little stuff is going to happen, and they will influence you, but it's kind of like that that Rachel McAdams and why is it movie? I'm trying to think of the dude. Um Channing Tatum.
Okay.
So it's an old movie, like probably like 15 years now,
Okay.
maybe roughly. And so she ends up like her family's all these like rich and like like you live a certain way kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then she breaks off from that and starts doing like crazy art sculptures, moves in with this really like different guy, like not like her parents ideal situation for her, and
Mm-hmm.
like all this kind of stuff completely derails her life from like the like like the picket fence like rich family and like the life that they want you to go on, and she completely derails it, and then she's in a car accident and she loses her memory all the way back to when she was engaged to a different guy, the guy that her parents wanted her to be with, and she was doing the school that her parents wanted her to do and like living that life, so her memory is all lost of that whole transition into
Mm.
becoming an artist, breaking her engagement and finding this new guy and like everything, right? Um,
I just
and
looked it up. It's called The Vow because I was like, I don't know.
thank you.
You're
I could
welcome.
I could not remember the name of the movie. Um, yeah.
I've
And so
never seen it.
it's like it's a cutesy rom-com kind of thing, maybe less calm, but like a romantic drama. And so she feels like out of sorts because she literally went from like one, like I'm married, I'm gonna marry this guy, this is this thing I'm going to school for, and this is my life, dressing a certain way, having my hair a certain way, to like way over here. And like, so then she tries to live her life in this way with this person, not going through any of that transition. And like, it's kind of like if me and you were to like have like time jump. Like if 20-year-old me time jump to who I am right now, holy fuck.
Yeah, your 20-year-old me would be like, what the hell am I doing? I don't believe in Jesus anymore.
Stop. No, this is all wrong. You
Yeah,
are heathen. Like, no, no, no.
yeah.
And so so many things. Like there's like basically everything is like what the fuck. And so anyway, so that was her. She's like, what the fuck? Like, I don't belong here. This isn't me. I don't know how I got here. This is fucked. And so she goes back. She moves in with her parents. She starts going back to school like she was going to. Doesn't really rekindle, but kind of rekindles like a friendship with that same guy and everything. And then all of a sudden she starts getting distracted in school and doodling these sculptures. And she starts realizing things about this guy that she's like, fuck, why, what? And so it sped up this time because she's already done it and she already has awareness of this person that she became. And so what took her 3 years, then she moved into that progression again in like 5 months.
Hmm.
And it just happened. And she was like, oh, okay, this is me. This is the direction I was going in. But she had to take those steps again.
Yeah.
Going to be told by her new husband, who's her old husband, but like new to her, that this is who she is. She had to go through that. And so we're very much like that. And our intuition plays a role in helping us get there quicker, I
Hmm.
think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, like, okay, so there's so many ways that I could go with this, but with that whole story with Rachel McAdams going from doing it in 3 years to 5 months, the
Mhm.
thing that she developed by getting to that end result is she developed this frequency
Mhm.
that brought her to that timeline where she created all those things, right? So that's the reason that it happened so much faster. And I've talked about this before. I know you've talked about this before on this podcast, but when you reach a certain frequency, you're not going to forget that frequency. It's
Mhm.
now innately in tune with you. Like it's just a part of your field now. But in order to get there initially, it might feel really freaking difficult, right? That might be so against what you know. So, an example of this could be relationships, right? So, for me, I've always had a really solid relationship. I would argue that I looked at how my parents treated one another and I absorbed that frequency from them. I saw
Mhm.
how they treated one another. They were very respectful to one another. The communication was good. I absorbed that frequency from them, right? So I was able to take that frequency and bring that to a relationship to have that healthy relationship with my husband, right? Some people don't necessarily have that
Mhm.
walk, right? That's not something that's given to us.
Mhm.
So we have to kind of figure it out, right? This is the same thing that you look at if kids are born into wealthy homes as opposed to not so wealthy homes. It
Yeah.
can be, it doesn't have to be, but it can be a lot more difficult for the child that's born into poverty for them to change around their entire life because they have to change their frequency. They have to change their energy. So the story with Rachel McAdams basically changing her frequency in a matter of a couple months as opposed to 3 years, she'd already done it, right? So she already knew how to do it. So when we're talking about intuition I think does play a huge part in this as well because your your soul, yourself actually knows who you are.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to learn that. It already knows it, right? And there's certain things that happen in our life that I personally believe will wake our soul up And now our soul is alive and is going, hey, this is who you are. And so that's
Mhm.
part of our intuition speaking to us like, hey, this is the direction that you're going, that we already know you want to go,
Yeah.
but you might have these other ideas of things that you want to do, right? Like, and so, yeah, there's nothing right, wrong, good, bad about taking those other paths. It
Mhm.
just might mean that getting to that soul level that you actually wanted to get to in the first place, why you came to this existence, might take a little longer than if you just follow the intuition fully, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard because sometimes intuition can be muddled with emotions of our body, right? Because our body, out of fear, like that, what you were just describing about talking to your lawyer that you hadn't spoken to in years, that could have been a fear response, right? And like, I'm always asking myself, is this a fear response because I'm having some sort of fight or flight experience and I just want somebody to help me? And you have to like kind of sort that out. Or is this actually my intuition telling me to call my lawyer right now? Right? That's a very fine line and sometimes a very difficult line to
Mhm.
traverse. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons that many of us do end up doing
Yeah.
different things than what our intuition tells us to, because we're like, well, wait, am I listening to my intuition, or am I getting derailed because I have some sort of emotional tie to something? Maybe I'm subconsciously being triggered and I feel like I need to do this because I'm feeling abandoned in some way, and so I need to reach out to somebody and talk to somebody about something that I already know. But yeah, so sometimes that's what makes life kind of fun in some ways, because it's like, who fucking cares? Like, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. You're not going to win a gold medal at the end of your life that says, you did it. You got to the end. You made your life purpose. That's not the thing. That's not a thing at all. And I think a lot of times when talking about intuition, people can get stuck on that because they're like, well, but what's the right direction? It really
Yeah.
doesn't matter because you're going to get where you need to go regardless.
Yeah. Well, and that fear is very confusing. Like, and
Mhm.
that was, I thought that the reason I was having that voice was because I don't like the unknown. And I
Mm,
have a lot of unknowns right now. And so every once in a while I get into this place where I'm like, I need to just talk and have these answers.
right.
And I kept on putting them off and being like, no, I don't go to court again until the end of May. Like or sorry, end of April. I'm good. Like I don't need to deal with this right now.
Mhm.
And so I thought it was just my desire or fear of like the unknown part of
Yeah.
it. That's why I was pushing it off so much. And that's where it kept getting louder and louder. And then finally I was like, okay, this isn't just me,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so. And then oh, what was I gonna say? I completely disappeared. But yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you kind of like perfectly explained what I was just talking about too, where it's like sometimes we're like, is this fear or is this my intuition? And it's not always easy to
Mhm.
figure that out. And that's why sometimes in my own life, I don't follow my intuition because I'm like, am I fearful because I feel like if I don't do this thing right now, it's not going to be available. Like for Derek's situation, he probably was thinking in a fear mentality of, well, if I don't buy it now, this is a really good price. When am I going to get this price ever again for this particular tool? Right? There's a sense of that is a little bit of like FOMO. What if I miss out on this? Right?
Mhm.
Like, what if this is my only opportunity? And I don't think that if we're supposed to go a certain direction, I don't think that there's only one
No.
chance to get there at all. Like when people are like, oh, but I have to choose the right thing. I have this door or this window that I could walk through. And it's like, you're going to get where you need to go regardless.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter which direction you end up going. There's going to be some more difficult paths, and
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that because you'll learn things along the way with that too.
Yeah.
But all of life is just a process. And when I stopped worrying about, well, what if I'm doing the wrong thing? Why can't I just worry about having fun? If I'm
Mhm.
having fun, then the things that need to show up are going to show up. That's all
Yeah.
that really matters. And so for me, like, a couple of years ago, I had a personal reading from a mutual mentor that we've talked about on this podcast. And one of the things she told me kind of got me a little bit derailed because she was like, oh, your soul wants to talk about the stuff that you and I are talking about on this podcast right now. She's like, your soul wants to talk about that. And so it kind of derailed me because I was kind of like, oh shit, well, I'm not doing that. And I don't know how to do that. Right. Like instead of just going with the flow and seeing what happened. Right.
Mhm.
Like I felt like, oh my God, what if I miss it? What if I go the wrong direction again? And then I have to learn more lessons because of it. Who fucking
Yeah.
cares? Let's just
Yeah.
have fun. Like, I
Yeah.
don't need to sit here and be like, my life purpose is to talk about spiritual things and who I am as a person. But who fucking cares? Just have fun. And that
Mhm.
stuff, those things will present themselves. And if you want to take them, you
Yeah.
can, right? If
Yeah.
that sounds like fun, go for it. Enjoy the process. That's really
Yeah.
all that matters at the end of the day, in my opinion.
Definitely. And that's the biggest thing too, is just knowing that it's all going to work out.
Hmm.
Like we get into these stress mentalities of what's the right choice or how we're going to make it through. But when you have a frequency of everything's going to work out for me, it does. And
Yeah.
like the amount of blessings that I have received over the last few months, like it's like, holy shit. Like, had that not happened in that exact way, I don't know how I would have the life I have right now.
Hmm.
And it's like a mutual beneficial, like, and same with my friend. Like, it was like we both helped each other. And had it not worked out perfectly like that, um, I don't know where we either of us would be. But it was like, um, I took the gut step initially and made it happen. But had I not, I'm sure some other way would have made it
Brought
come up,
you. Yeah.
So I think that when things are going to happen, that voice is going to get louder and louder, like with calling my lawyer, like it's like that needed to happen. So that voice got louder and louder and louder until it happened.
Hmm.
Whereas with buying that wrong tool, which is inconvenient.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so with this mutually beneficial thing with me and my friend, like a situation would have presented itself in some way where it would have happened.
Hmm.
And um yeah, I really truly believe that when you're on that frequency, things work out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, um, I guess like my message for people is like trust your intuition, but don't get tripped by it. Like don't feel like, "Oh God, I missed it. Oh my God." Like you know how like when people are talking about following their intuition and when they follow their intuition, it always works out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true,
Mhm.
but it'll always work out regardless. Like you said, when
Mhm.
you're on that frequency anyways, even if you go somewhere that's kind of off in the weeds, it's going to work out anyways because if you're meant to do something, if you're meant to be somewhere, you're going to find your way there somehow.
Yeah.
Some way, somehow it's going to happen. So,
Yeah. Well, and that's the big thing too, is like when you give like trust and stuff that's like really stupid.
yeah, 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 yeah.
It's like, I'm going to apply for this thing that everyone that applies is going to get in. And if it's meant to be for me, I'll get in. And it's
Right.
like you're getting in. So
Mm-hmm.
like that doesn't really work. So a lot of people kind of go off of that where they like, I'm leaving it up to fate, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not. And yeah, so it's really about like taking your power back and like owning your life and like yes, things are going to work out for you when you're on that frequency, but it's action that gets you on that frequency. Like
Mm-hmm.
you like it might be all on a conscious
Thought.
subconscious
Yeah.
level where
Mm-hmm.
it's not tangible,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still action that is required. So
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so like going back to the example of the poverty versus the rich, like when you're on the frequency of somebody that knows how to create abundance out of their butt, like you don't have to work very hard because you've already created the thoughts, the feelings, the frequency in order to just create that quickly, right? Whereas in this poverty mindset, there's a lot that you have to overcome. There's a lot of noticing of yourself. There's a lot of changes that you need to do if you want to become that person that has made millions, right? Billions. It's really just about the different, what frequency do you want to be on? And the thing is that we always get the chance. That's the beautiful thing about life. We always get the chance to choose the
Mm-hmm.
frequency we want to be on. So at any point, I can choose, you know what, life's good. I actually feel like this is a good enough frequency for me, and I can just keep doing what I'm doing because I've already attracted quite a bit of things in my life, right? The problem with that is that I don't feel like that's what the soul wants. I think the soul really wants discovery. I think it really wants to learn, how do I become more in this 3D plane reality, right? That's
It
why we
wants
came here. It wants what?
expansion.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
so expansion means growing that frequency to something that you've not experienced before. So, I mean, how many people in life hit their 40th birthday and they're like, they look back at their life and they're like, what have I done?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're sitting there going, I've done some stuff, but is it really what I wanted? Right? Like, and so they're asking themselves without even really knowing it, is this the frequency that I actually want? And like that whole expansion, like the
Mm-hmm.
expansion of where the soul is like, oh, wait, but there is more curiosity. There's more to discover. There's more to learn. There's more to experience. And so there's just, I don't know, life is just a never ending um, grouping of all those different experiences that we can have.
Yeah. Well, and like right now, as we were like driving yesterday, Derek was like, I don't know how like you can have more on your plate right now. Like between like starting up companies and court and the kids and like volunteering at their school, like all the things. He's like, I don't know. And like we are going on a trip and we want to go skiing and snowboarding. We got passes. He's like, I don't know how we're gonna do it all. I'm like, that's the whole point, though. And like, I used to do way more than I do now. And it felt like way less because my mindset around it all was different.
Mm.
And so, if we have this mindset where it's like, okay, like this is all for me, not against me, I
Mm-hmm.
get to do all of this.
Yeah.
Like, I get to go on a trip, I get to go to Big White, I get to work in a way that I enjoy that makes me really good money, like all those things. I get the freedom I want. Um, like that is powerful. And like the higher you go, the more you expand, the more things you have to deal with. Like the more inner work you're going to have to do, the more things that fall on your plate, the more you're going to have to delegate. And that's part of the learning curve. That's
Yeah.
where I truly look at people that are successful and see where they stop at 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, and beyond,
Uh-huh.
is because how much do you want to expand?
Mm-hmm.
And to kind of put it more in a 3D way, I truly believe the way that you do that is with systems.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so like it's very 3D to have systems, but that's how you are able to keep expanding. It's not chaotic. It's systematic. And that's like for you, like you're a very great example that like you follow a lot of systems. You meditate every morning and every night,
Mm-hmm.
and that is your system. And that's what makes it so that you are able to keep expanding at the rate that you are
Mm-hmm.
because you have that system in place that supports it.
Right. Yeah. So, I completely lost what I was going to say because you started talking about that. But, um, when we're, oh yeah, this is what I was going to say. And this is like really big. This is something that Dr. Joe talks about all the time. He says, don't you know you need the challenge to change?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of us look at this expansion
Yeah.
as like this problem or this challenge. A challenge is a better way to look at it because a challenge
Yeah.
feels like, oh, I get to rise up and I'm the underdog and I get to grow from this, right? Whereas a problem is like, oh, this isn't good. I don't like this. So it's just a different experience, right? But when we're looking at life, in order to have that expansion, we really do have to be challenged. Just like the poor person has to be challenged. If they want to walk a different life than what they currently are, they
Mm-hmm.
have to be challenged to think differently. And it starts with the thoughts. always
Mhm.
starts with the thought. So if we're challenged to change the way that we think, then yes, we can grow and expand. But if we just keep staying the same, we're going to keep getting the same results, right? So one of my friends went to this Dr. Joe event that we just came back from, and she's built a multi-million dollar business. And at this point though, she's like, I don't know what I want to do. And the truth of the matter is that the last event that I went to with her a year ago, she said the exact same thing. So she was kept asking herself, because she knew that she was stuck, but she's kind of like, I don't know if I want to have more challenges. And she specifically said this, and she's like, I realize that I'm saying this. She knows, like, she knows where she is, but she was like, I don't know if I want the challenge. At the end of the day, I think the challenge is going to come regardless, because our soul brings it to us because it wants us to expand and grow. So I
Well,
think that'll come eventually. But
and like the thing is, you're going to have challenges regardless.
hmm,
So you're either up leveling
yes.
to different challenges, which are like when you're at a level one, to move to a level two feels hard. And then
Hmm.
once you move there, that level one doesn't feel hard anymore. And then moving from level two to level three feels hard. But it's like, it's all relative, right? Like in that moment, everything feels hard. And I look at some of the little things that I went through, and I'm like, those felt way harder than some of the big, massive ass challenges I have today because I've built that muscle up. So
Exactly.
you're going to have challenges no matter what. But your reward is going to be different depending on
Yeah.
how you're expanding.
Hmm.
And so you can have challenges that feel awful, but they're really little. And you're not getting much of a reward, or you can keep leveling up and you can have challenges that feel the same but are harder, like logistically, and a much, much better reward.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we could go into that on a whole other episode. Maybe we should write that down and we should talk about that next time, because that was a whole other topic.
Yeah.
So, but friends, I think we're going to wrap up today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want. So, if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead, give us a like, subscribe, let us know in the comments what your thoughts are. And then if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast host, go ahead and give us a 5-star, leave us a comment as well. So with that, we're going to call TMI Advice You Didn't Want a wrap for today. See everyone next time. Thanks so much for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue hanging out with us, and don't forget to subscribe.